You're watching Hromadske International. Joining us today is Glenn Grant. He's a former British Army colonel and current project manager for UK-funded reform project at Ukraine's Ministry of Defence. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
So Ukraine's military has come a very long way. It's seen an overhaul in the defense sector in terms of the equipment, the logistics, the training programs. What can you tell us about the progress that you've witnessed since starting to work at this new project?
The progress at the front is huge. I mean, it's it's a remarkable testament to the soldiers and the officers at the front. And there is no doubt that the last few months that the supply to the front line has improved in a lot of areas. There are still a lot of huge gaps, and the supply chain is still not as fluid and sharp as it needs to be for a military at war. But I mean, compared to 2 years ago, I mean it's fundamentally different. But you've got areas like uniforms and boots. We've still got some soldiers that are not fully equipped in basics like that, and that needs more time, more effort, more understanding of the problem, and that's mainly a structural problem. Is just that the part of the what do you want to call it, the degradation by Russia of the defence forces in that 20-odd years before the war included breaking up a lot of the efficient systems, and one that they broke the most was logistics including medical. So there's a change at the front end. The medical has definitely improved. The supplies are getting better at the front end, but there's still discordancy. So you've still got large areas of medical support being done by volunteers, and nobody has really pulled together the volunteers and the military. So you've got places on the front line where you've got volunteers and military, but they don't have radios. The volunteers don't have radios, so they can't communicate that they need to be at X instead of Y, and they certainly do not want to use mobile phones because that brings down the rain of God on them. Right,
and Ukraine's volunteer force has been vital in Ukraine's effort.
The civilian volunteers, yeah, it's been vital, and it still is vital. I mean, there's huge amounts of bits and bobs that are being taken to the front line. Everything from car tyres to engine parts to... I saw one of the volunteers, I was looking at his pictures a week ago, and his van was full of, what's the word I'm talking, material for padding out the bunker so that it will be warm in the winter. Because the bunker is obviously it's just a sort of a concrete block, and it'll be completely freezing in winter time. So there's things like that. There's heating oil for the heaters. A lot of these things are coming from straightforward, still from people's purses to the volunteers and being taken forward.
Right, so steps that still need to be taken within the reform process. Now, in March, you gave quite a critical interview to a Ukrainian TV channel where you stated that you weren't quite happy with the way things were going, what you saw as part of the reform process within the defense ministry. And you talked about the Ukrainian army's military might, like how strong they really are, basically. But since that time, have you noticed any real and meaningful changes since working closely at the MOD?
The answer is yes. I mean, but then they're more green shoots than major changes. I mean, if you take a sort of a garden picture, there are green shoots all over the place, but there are also some really large weeds that need to be cut out still. And the weeds in some cases are strangling the green shoots. In other cases, the green shoots are growing up stronger. So it's very hard to say, good and bad. There's still both in places. I mean, a lot of these things are to do with culture and the concepts. We still have the military at the highest level, and a lot of the people in the Ministry of Defence are still working off the old Soviet concepts. They are staying with those purely and simply because they're too frightened to change, because they don't know another one. And so in wartime, they are staying with the familiar. They're holding onto mother's apron as tightly as possible. And that's a problem. So because the reformers are saying you need to change, you need to, for example, delegate responsibility much more to people. But there's still a huge amount of centralisation. If you look at procurement, I mean, the procurement is we are still centralising, you know, the procurement of socks. It's that sort of stupid, you know, everything is going up and being checked. Partially this is to remove corruption, but also partially it's a conceptual thing that this is how we've always done it. Everything gets checked at the centre.
Right, the kind of mentality and the culture surrounding it. For example, the Razumkov Center recently published an article where it talks about some of the major stumbling blocks of reforms within the Ministry of Defense. And they said that this includes issues of culture and mentality, which are slow to change. Now, obviously, you've just mentioned some of the examples of that. But what steps do you think that should be taken now to overcome these so-called stumbling blocks?
Well, the biggest thing that RAND have said, the RAND from the RAND report, is the need to have a civilian Ministry of Defence and a civilian minister, and I would agree with that. I mean, the current minister is doing a lot to create change, but he's still a general. And so that there is not this there's not this sort of two-way looking at things that is needed in an organisation where civilians look at value for money and the military look at capability and how to kill people better, and then you put the two of them together and out of it you get the best course. And at the moment we're still in the sort of the military side, and the value for money side hasn't actually caught up. So that we've got the Ministry of Defence with the budget and the money, but the General Staff making the plans. And that's a major stumbling block. And that was highlighted by RAND as well. And that, you know, that the business processes have got to change. But they won't change until you actually get a more civilian organisation that actually starts thinking in terms of the whole war is actually about money, is how you spend the money, how you use the money, and where you place the priorities.
Yeah, one of their suggestions was to completely overhaul this procurement sector for arms, particularly Ukr-Obronprom, the state arms manufacturer. They criticize it specifically for its lack of transparency and possible conflict of interest because they are the country's biggest arms importer. Now, it was created in 2010 by the former disgraced Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, and it's still around, and it's still in charge of over 120 companies. Now, but their mismanagement of the arms industry is basically one of the reasons why, at the start of the war with the Russian-backed insurgent forces in eastern Ukraine, the Ukrainian army was at such a poor level. Their mismanagement.
I mean, it's actually, I think it's even more complex than that. Unfortunately, it is more complex. I mean, I can say that in procurement in general, the Reform Office in the Ministry of Defence have done a brilliant job, actually hauling things that were being done outside of the proper routes into the Prosoro system, and actually having competitions for buying things, and that saved a huge amount of money. And they've just started doing it for things like defence housing and contracting as well. Although some of the processes have still got to be improved around that. But that is a major change. But the arms side is being kept very close inside the General Staff and secretive. And they're using, you know, arguments that they believe that we shouldn't tell anybody what we're actually doing. The trouble is that by not telling anybody what you're doing, you're not exposing anything to Parliament, and you're not exposing anything to business, to allow business to say, well, we could do that better.
Open competition.
Open competition, and there are so many arms companies around that would be allowed to actually to do everything from maintenance to producing new things. That you know, open competition is needed, and the defence industry. Again, this is conceptual because people in the old days thought that the defence industry was part of the Ministry of Defence, and in fact it actually was. If you go to many Eastern European countries, there are still large parts of their defence industry are owned by the Ministry of Defence, and there's a deputy minister who is effectively the arms man, and they run it, usually extremely inefficiently. I mean, because business is always anything that, you know, twice as good, if not 3 times as good as a government-managed organisation. And this feeling that we have to hang on to the business as part of the defence system is still very, very strong. Although Rand, I think, actually said, it should be got rid of as quickly as possible and placed to the marketplace, and see how many of those 120 companies are actually viable.
Right. Ukra Oberon promised to begin a kind of a road work. I don't know. I don't know
roadmap of change.
Roadmap of change, if that's how they said it. But how effective that is, I guess we'll see in the future. But speaking about making procurement of weapons open to to the open market, making it. Do you think that there could be any negative outcome of less secrecy and more open business type of approach to procurement of weapons?
I think you've always got to have some degree of secrecy, but it's that degree of secrecy does not mean sort of taking it to the point of absurdity. I mean, it's usual that big weapon procurements, even in wartime, are agreed by Parliament, because Parliament has the say on the money, effectively. And I mean, if you look back at the Second World War or the First World War in Britain, all these things that we were doing were absolutely almost open. You could actually see that they weren't hidden away. What we're going to do. I mean, we declared how many warships we were going to build. We declared what we were going to buy in terms of armour. And it's the secrecy is where you use them and when you use them, not that you've got them. It's when you take them to the front line and how you take them, as with tanks in the First World War, keeping it as secret as possible. I mean, the Germans knew we had tanks. What they didn't know is where we were going to place them and what we were going to do with them and what the tactics were for using them, for the breakthrough. And that's where the secrecy needs to come, operational secrecy, rather than, you could call it, business secrecy at the other end. Are there any real drawbacks? There are always some drawbacks. You can't do anything you can't make a change. You can't change a major company like that without something breaking and something not being good. But you're hoping to do that at the same time as getting, 100, 200% improvement in lots of other areas. And its management is about picking up quickly where the breaks are and where the bad things are and fixing them, not to let them to become bad. Right.
What are some top advice for the Ministry of Defence at the current time?
I think civilianisation of the ministry, of all the key posts, would be my main thing. Is and really to bring in as many people we can with MBAs and with business experience, because the future conduct of the war. I mean, if this goes on for another 10 years, this is about money. And it's about money, and it's about planning, and it's about getting value for money, and there are so many areas of the defence industry, of the defence that are starved of money at the moment because there's not enough to go round. The prioritisation of the money and actually making the plans fit the money has got to be the most important thing, and that ranges everything from how many people you have, what equipment you give them, what training you give them, all this sort of thing. It needs a root and branch reform, but by people that have got business skills and business management thinking, not just military thinking. Combination of the two. It's the combination of the two that gets you the best result.
Right. So speaking about business, Ukraine has officially stopped selling any type of military equipment to Russia. But there have been rumors of Ukrainian officials still selling to Russia via third parties. Now, have you heard anything about this?
That's completely outside of my understanding. I mean, I haven't followed that at all. But I've heard the rumors, but I haven't followed, so I don't know how true they are.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming in today.
Yeah, thank you.